Alright, are we live? I take it we are. Inna alhamdulillah wa kafah. Oh, wait. Nobody's here. The joys of speaking to yourself. Just share this. Un momento. Share it from this phone. Look at that. It's right. Come on. You know when your phone starts freezing, is that the time that the network or the company is trying to tell you that you need to buy the new model? Let me just see. Un momento. Espárame right now. Let me just check this. Alright, so I'm sharing that. Alright, so Inna alhamdulillah wa kafah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulih al-Mustafa wa ala ibadihi alladhina irtada wa man bihudahum ihtada wa bi athari ahli al-Madinah iqtafa wa ba'd. People, fa salamullahi alaykum, ahlan wa sahlan bikum, marhaban, Juan Ying Leicester, bienvenidos a todos. People, and of course, swagatam. Alright, salam from Scotland, doing it. What is the topic? There are a few topics. As always, people, there are a few topics on tonight. I will be looking at also how we address stories from the Quran. That's one thing I'd like to look at. I'd like to also look at and take some of the questions that people are saying. I'd like to highlight a recent very friendly discussion dialogue that I was involved in. Also, people, I'd like to say a few words on the village wars, an update, share the gossip. Everybody loves a bit of gossip, huh? What's going down with so why not? Somebody's got to do the devil's work. Right, so that's something we'll share a bit about a little later on the village wars between Asrar and what's his name, the Usman, the Deobandis from up north. So what's the latest on that? It's always it's good to kind of take out some popcorn time to time. Right, so what's going on? Mu'adh is online. Ayub, ahlan wa sahlan bikum. It's dhikr night on Mufti Abu Layth, Monday session, Al-Mawlid. It's Al-Mawlid, isn't it? Alright. Osama is in the house, people. Alright. Rash, Riz, ahlan wa sahlan bikum. People, as you're tuning in, click like, click share. I need not go through the protocol with you guys for your allegiance, for the deviation. There you go. Click like, click share, that's it. Let the world know of your rebellious state. That's what I'm talking about. So what else is going down, people? Last week we had Momo is live. Right, so somebody said, Rash saying happy Mawlid. Alright, Momo is in the house. Saima, ahlan wa sahlan. Khalil, Hafid, alright. Well, people are tuning in. Last week was the centenary, the 100th show, people. So we did it live from the Ark. It was actually, it was great fun, actually. I thoroughly enjoyed it, I must say. And I thought to myself, you know what? This is actually quite fun. We might do maybe maybe we might do once a month live from the Ark. So that would be, it'd be fun, it'd be interesting. And it's good to meet people, you know, it's good to, sometimes you see people like this. Maj there just said, Assalamu alaikum. Now, some of you guys, Facebook faces, for all I know, your computer algorithms, you have no reality. But, you know, when I have an actual show and you turn up, it's like, what the hell? But it was great last week, meeting a lot of the guys, some people coming from around the Midlands, different places, Coventry, and not sure where they came from, but they turned up, so shukran. As always, it was, you know, un placer, it was a pleasure, mucho gusto, right? So, inshallah. Right, Dante, Riz saying, nah, I'm real. Well... دع ما ادعته النصارى في نبيهم واحكم بما شئت مدحا فيه واحتكمي. Alright, the Qasida Burda, can you start at 9 p.m? I suppose, no, the actual live sessions, that, as in, these are live as well, but the one I did turning up at the Ark, that was about 8:30 or something like that, it began. Right, that would be awesome. Right, so people, what's going on? Luxurious Luton. Yes, salam. Luton. The only thing... I was going to say the only thing good about Luton, well, what is using the airport from there. That's... It's like a smooth drive down, and that's it. That's the... Right, Osma had turned up. Right, ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban, but she was the only woman there in the live, so yep, you do need more women to turn up. I think sometimes it's the timings that we host these things at, and then to be fair, I only gave like I think 2 days notice or something, and still, I mean, a lot of people turned up. I didn't expect people to turn up like that. And yeah, so of course men and women all welcome, but I think also women ain't sometimes so used to going to Islamic events like this, or maybe they just go to the very strict kind of, I don't know what people. Nevertheless, Hussein El Zami says salam Haji. Lastu bi Haji. I'm not a Haji, but I've done Umrah. Right, that's why I don't want to be the only one there. Well, people, I'm sure you won't be. Right, so nevertheless, let's get back to some of your questions. What's been going on? What is the latest? What's the latest? You know, the latest. The Castoria, that kind of, what's the latest going down? Well, the UK is in a bit of a mess, as everybody's aware of, and I just can't understand why on earth the government doesn't just offer another goddamn second referendum. Get this thing on the table, get the UK back in the EU. I just can't understand that. So that's obviously some crazy stuff going on. What else, people? What else? Those of you that didn't know, it was Jaun Elia, Hazrat Jaun Elia, the legendary poet. It was his death anniversary, so there was a lot of things going on online about his poems and stuff like that. I think it was probably on the 8th, so just over a week ago. A legend, one of the most, I think he's the most popular poet on social media, probably, arguably. That's what I think. So, somebody saying, what happened to the moustache? The moustache is right there. I don't put the dry wax on it. Right, so, yeah, so Jaun Elia Sahib. I'll tell you a bit about him, actually. Just a few words, since we've tuned in. A bit of history about the poet. He's somebody who is one of my favorites. He migrated, he was born, I think, around was it 1931 or something like that, in India, and then he migrated probably a decade after the partition. He was from a place called Amroha in India, a very renowned city stroke town for its adabi kind of contribution, for its language, for what it's produced. And he did then travel to Pakistan 10 years after the partition, and he lived there in Karachi. And he was incredibly well versed, not only in things like Arabic, in Farsi, in Hebrew, apparently, in Sanskrit, learning Sanskrit, learning... he'd studied all of these things. And something I didn't know about his name, which I, upon research, came to discover, that Elia, I thought, was a Christian, because Elia in Arabic, Elia in Arabic, it refers to Jerusalem. So I thought that he was from a Christian background. Now, as it appears, he's not. Elia, I didn't know this, but apparently the Shia refer to Ali as Elia. That they claim that Ali radiallahu anh claimed that his name in the biblical scriptures was referred to as Elia. So the Shia tradition have a story that when Ali was approached by some of the, I think whether they were Jews or Christians, and he said, "You find my name in your scriptures as Elia." So Jaun Elia's whole family, his dad, who was a major poet, Shafiq Hassan Elia, he had that title Elia. His other brothers, Muhammad Taqi, Rais Amrohi, all these people had it. And Jaun, which is John, I didn't know this either until just researching it, that is apparently the name of the slave, or one of the slaves of Hussein. So Hussein, radiallahu an, the grandson of the Prophet, en route to Karbala, one of his slaves, I think an African slave, his name was John. So Jaun Elia. So like in that sense, like that, John, the slave of Ali, like that. And that was his name anyway, Jaun Elia. And another intriguing thing I didn't really know, that I was quite surprised by, is that Jaun Elia studied in Deoband. This is what I read online. No way. It's like, whoa. But he studied in Deoband apparently in the 50s, or prior to the 50s, or around that time, when Deoband perhaps wasn't what it's become today. Perhaps it was much more open-minded at that point. Right, so he studied in Deoband, and he then later on obviously traveled to Karachi, but he was very influenced by other thoughts and communism and stuff like this, Marxism, and I think we sometimes see communism as just because of the Western propaganda, we just see the negative side of it. But in essence, what we keep forgetting is that Marxism was in essence a cry for equality. So a lot of people today, when they think commie, bloody communists, they don't understand that this socialism, the socialist movements, they were in essence a cry for equality. And a lot of the civil rights movements, not civil rights, but like part of civil rights as in employment rights and these kind of rights, only emerged in the West as a reaction to communism, because otherwise communism would spread, because that was what it was stressing. And so this poet, Jaun Elia, was also heavily kind of drawn in by that ideology. But I don't think he had much, generally believed much. He was from a Shia background, but he seems to, he was from the family of the Prophet, he claims to be Sayyid, but I don't think he claimed to believe in God. So later on, he was definitely either agnostic or an atheist. But his poetry is amazing, and some of the stark realities he touches up on, and since it was his death, he has a very famous line where he says, जानी क्या आज मेरी बरसी थी यानी आज के दिन मर गया था मैं. That he says that Jani, like dear, like, is today my death anniversary? Does that mean on this date I died? And it really is a strange line to read, you know, later, especially, I suppose, since the person's dead. It is, you know, it has a, wow, like a striking effect. And he was a very stark kind of poet. If I did have something, I wouldn't have minded sharing some things, but I don't see. Nope, I think I've put them out somewhere else. Otherwise, I thought if I did have his 1-2 things, I would have read a ghazal or two of his out. But Jaun Elia. Nevertheless, let's take some questions then, people. What's going on? Politics, they ruin everything. Somebody's asking for my views on Ayaan Hirsi. I'm not sure what that means. I mean, what does my views on Ayaan Hirsi mean? I don't know too much about her, to be honest. I've seen her on some of the kind of atheist shows, or sometimes the ex-faith kind of shows, or sometimes I've seen her presence as in on these things. I haven't watched much. I've seen her on 1-2 of the programs on YouTube historically when people like Hitchens and Sam Harris, and they used to do certain shows. I think she was on one. And on that, she often was just speaking about things like FGM, female genital mutilation, and she was speaking about the kind of atrocities, I think, in Somalia or places like this. So I don't really know too much about her. I know I think she tried to get into politics in Norway or wherever she was, and then I think there was some issue, and then she did get in. But I haven't really followed or kept track of her or anything, so I don't really know what to say about her. I think, you see, in my understanding, some of the, and I could be wrong about her, so I don't want to say this is about her, but some of these people, they are just reactions to the Muslim to the Muslim phenomenon. Like, so Muslims, sometimes we become nutcases and do stupid stuff, and then people hate it and they react, and then they hate the faith because, you know, because we're doing stupid stuff. So I don't like people doing FGM, mutilating, you know, the genitals of girls and stuff like this is stupid. I mean, it's beyond stupid. It's a monstrosity. Now, why the Muslim communities were not up in arms? Why nobody, frankly, let's just be honest, Muslims don't really care. The Muslim world, anyway. Not Muslims, but the Muslim world doesn't care about this kind of stuff. You know, like when I say that, like, I'm sure the majority of the Muslims do not practice FGM. Right, so just to get that very clear, that it's not an Islamic concept per se. Although some Muslim countries do practice it. I think part of Somalia probably did, and I know some countries in Africa do, and I think some of them happen to be Muslim and non-Muslims who share that kind of horrific heritage, if you like. And then some other Muslim countries like Malaysia and Indonesia, they practice FGM. Now, you see, the question with this is that although most Muslims, when asked about what in Arabic they call khafad, like female circumcision, most Muslims reject it and say it has no basis in the Quran or Sunnah. Yet they didn't make a fuss about this stuff. They just don't seem to care. Like, as in, we're not doing it. They would say, we're not doing it. You know, if this country does it, we don't really care. I think that's a really, I think that is the problem, you see, because those people who are doing it are using, the Muslims who are doing it are using Islam to justify it. So they're saying they believe there's a hadith, they believe that this was a practice of Islam, they believe the Shafi'i madhab encourages this to happen, hence the Malaysians and the Indonesians who are Shafi'i practice it. So people they ought to have a responsibility to condemn it. They ought to send delegations and deal with this, but they don't. So the only countries that deal with it are the Western countries. And then people just hate on the Western. It's a vicious kind of circle. So yeah, so that's what's going on. I've met people doing dawah. Well, good for you, John Fisher. Good for you. Right, so people, let me share an interesting visit I undertook yesterday. So we were invited by why are you coming fast? Why are you coming fast? Right, so we were invited. I was invited to visit a Sheikh al-Hadith in Leicester yesterday. A great, very respectable person, great akhlaq, great character, Sheikh Idris Falahi, or Molana Idris Falahi. He's a senior Sheikh al-Hadith. He teaches Bukhari in one of the senior madrasas in Leicester. And he's been doing so for many years. He's considered senior to a lot of the Deobandi scholars, especially in Leicester. So I was invited to his house yesterday with a few other scholars there, and it was an awesome evening, I have to say. He was incredibly, and it was by courtesy of his son Sheikh Uwais, and it was an amazing evening really, because quite often the way I am, many people, because of my views, like let's say certain Deobandis or certain, they could be Brailwi, whoever, they will not want to, they'll be like, no, this guy, devil. They don't want to engage. So he was very, respectful. He was very courteous, very generous, obviously inviting us, giving us all this time, having a dialogue, being very respectful and dignified throughout the entire dialogue. It was predominantly in Urdu, and we spoke on so many issues, things to do with ethics, things to do with revelation, how it's perceived, things to do with the age of Aisha radiallahu anha, on marriages and women's rights. And it was really fascinating actually, and I enjoyed it, even though he didn't really agree much with my points of view, despite me giving, even at the end it's like, well, but that said, at least he was up for a dialogue, you understand. So he was at least up for a dialogue. He was at least prepared to listen and engage the things that we, these concerns, and I just found that amazing in itself. I believe that maybe Sheikh Riyadh al-Haq was due to attend, but he couldn't. That would have been an interesting dynamic had he attended. Oh, that would have been interesting. But maybe another time with Sheikh Riyadh al-Haq, Hazrat. So I have to say, I was saying this, those of you that know Sheikh Riyadh al-Haq, I think, is definitely, if you take the Deobandi, you could even take the Brailvis as well. Brailvis and Deobandis. Now, generally, he was probably one of the first and foremost scholars in the UK to be incredibly well spoken. You have to, credit where credit is due. I mean, he was ahead of his time in the 90s. He was one of the first people to not only start his lectures in English, but in good, I mean, real good English. He was eloquent. He was, I mean, I suppose I'm using the terms was because I'm referring to a time when you either had speeches in Urdu or you had one or two American scholars like Sheikh Hamza Yusuf or Sheikh Noor emerging at that time. And then you had people like Sheikh Faisal in London, and everybody else was just bud. You know, they spoke with just an accent. Shockingly, even the British, even, you know, you still get that, unfortunately. You get the British-born scholars, and they still have the kind of twang, bud twang. I don't know how that happens, but it does. But Sheikh Riyadh al-Haq was way ahead of his time, and he was amazingly spoken. And he was doing things like recording cassettes and putting them out there and having hundreds of cassettes and topics and Bukhari and tafsir and fiqh and introducing these notions, and he was so ahead of things. And then I know he got into his little the whole controversy and the drama and all of that, but put that aside, you see, and then he refused to adapt with the time. And this is an interesting lesson to take from here. He refused to accept social media. And he just pretty much just withered away. And, you know, and all these other people rose. And now, although Sheikh Riyadh al-Haq does try to make one or two social media clips, but it's doesn't amount to anything, because you know, there's so many things now. But what I'm trying to say is that the lesson you can take from this is that it is important to always be with the time and to adapt with the time. So when the society changes, and all of a sudden, like when social media emerged, to refuse to embark upon social media, he almost, one could argue, lost everything that he was, you know, had at that time, because he was at the heights. He was like the number one probably scholar in the UK, and now probably hardly anybody, you know, he doesn't have that kind of. But yeah, that was just my thoughts for the Sheikh Riyadh al-Haq fans, and obviously we're fans as well. Much love to the Sheikh. Right, so what else is going on, people? What else is going on? Dawah people on YouTube don't support Abu Layth. What is the difference between the two groups? John Fisher? Who is John Fisher? Is that like a spam name, or is that next Christian? I grew up thinking of God as Father. I often say Father when I pray. Someone told me that is blasphemous as a Muslim, giving God a form. Are we allowed to say Father? Like, if you said Father because of your Christian heritage, generally Muslims wouldn't say Father, generally speaking. So I wouldn't advise Muslims who don't, for example, are just born and raised as Muslims, I wouldn't advise them to start adopting terms that are Christian terms in saying, Our Father who art in heaven. But if you come from that background, and at times you refer to God as Father, there's no real harm in that, because it was your background, and obviously you're still so used to the rhetoric, and you don't. Obviously, everybody knows what you mean by Father, and it is most certain that the ancient prophets and the ancient people did refer to God as Father. It's most certain that they did. And hence they would refer, the Jewish people would refer to themselves as the children of God. And even today, people still do use the term that we are all the children of God. In the Quran, it says, Allah quotes the Jews saying, you know, that nahnu abna'ullahi wa ahibba'u, that we are the beloved and people of God and the children of God. So I think there's no issue from that baggage perspective. So if you say it, you know, you're making dua, you're praying, and you say, "Oh Father, please," I don't think that's a big deal or anything like that. I don't think you've committed blasphemy or you've left the fold of Islam or anything absurd like that. That said, I wouldn't advise Muslims who don't have that baggage to start adopting Christian or Hindu terms or, you know, different religious terms. I wouldn't advise that as a religious practice. But if they came from that background and they said it, you know, if somebody came from a certain, then I think there's no, you know, there's no real, you know, it's not a major thing, but I'm sure it's understandable. Jews don't call themselves the children of God. This is not in the Tanakh. Okay, John. John Fisher has spoken. What can you tell me what can you tell me what Jesus was? Last time I checked, Jesus was a Jew, wasn't he? And so when he was saying, oh, the Father in heaven, who the hell was he talking to? The Jews. So if they never used this term and they never understood what on earth he was on about, so they this is what you call this is what you call too many brain cells unused. Alright, so somebody said he was a Muslim, as in Jesus was a Muslim. Shabash, huh? Unless you mean by that as in he was a prophet of God. Is that what you mean? They said son of God to mean a righteous man. Of course, that's what I mean. Son of God, the sons of God, and these things are meant like they didn't believe, even the Christians didn't believe that Jesus is the actual Son of God. Like as in the actual, like God had, you know, they don't believe that God had some kind of sex with Mary or something like this. They don't, that's dumb thinking. Christians don't believe that. That's just like some Muslims spread sometimes things like this. That's not true. Right, so Jesus was considered to be from the Goyim. Oh, was he? Okay, thanks. Right, Jesus was definitely Jewish, my friend. So, but you have to remember that the tribes of Israel were many tribes coming from the 12 tribes, and at that time the kingdom of Judea, and the whole thing, how it was split and the different. So it was a huge thing. It wasn't a small. They weren't a small people. They were several. I mean, huge quantities. Right. What do you think about Molana Khadim Rizvi? I think Molana Khadim Rizvi Sahib has needs some special psychiatric help. Is someone as articulate as Sheikh Riyadh al-Haq still a rigid Deobandi? I don't really know any Deobandis after Sheikh Riyadh al-Haq that are public speakers that were articulate. I mean, they speak English, and I'm sure many of them speak it fine to a considerable level. Most Deobandis, and even most Brelvi, even British born and raised, still carry accents and a bit of that bud twang to them. I don't know how they get that, considering they've lived in the UK, but then they somehow managed to hold on to it firmly, like the faith. Alhamdulillah. Right, so do we accept Mutawatir Hadith if it goes against the Quran? There is no such thing as Mutawatir Hadith in its true definition. I have a clip of that on YouTube where I quote Imam Shatibi and explaining these things. The Quran is always given precedence, okay, over isolated narrations of Hadith. Do we accept Mutawatir Hadith if they go against the three principles of against the reason, against the Quran, against Islamic principles? Well, there is no such thing as a Mutawatir Hadith. This is a concept, it's a myth. You see, there's two major myths circulating in the Islamic sciences. It is the myth of Ijma', that is the myth of the Usuliyin and the Fuqaha. They've got their myth. Right, so the Fuqaha have their myth, which is the myth of Ijma', and the Muhaddithin have their myth, which is the myth of Mutawatir Hadith. There is no such thing as Mutawatir Hadith. And it's absurd, and I would tell you to, because the conditions they give, they refuse to accept those conditions. And so Mutawatir would mean, the condition they give is that every chain has exponential growth. So for example, let's just say, and they don't know what number to give it, but they often quote the number 5. So the way this is going to work is there's a person at the top of the chain. He says something. So in this being a hadith, let's say now, because it could go back to a companion as well technically, but let's treat this just solely as a hadith. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said something. 5 companions have heard from him. Okay. Now from each one of these, 5 people has to hear. Okay. So you've got 5, and then from each one of those 5, you've got 5, 5, 5. So there's 25 already at this layer. Then from those 25, at least 5 have to hear from each layer of 25. So you can do the maths yourself. And this is how the hadith, and that's just in 3 levels after the Prophet, it's reached that scope. There isn't a single hadith on earth that is like that. Not a single hadith. So what they do is they then keep this definition of exponential growth, but they say that they don't use that when it comes to claiming mutawatir. They say, oh, what we've got 5 different companions from the Prophet, and from them we've got isolated chains coming down. So 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. We're going to call this mutawatir as well. But in our definition, that's not the mutawatir, which is nonsense, because this one that you're claiming is still susceptible to error. And then the funny thing is, check this out. The mutawatir hadith that they claim are mutawatir, most of them, or many of them, are da'if. They're not even sahih. You couldn't make this stuff up if you tried. So the hadith, it's like Suyuti and all these other people claim, they bring books with, here are 200 hadith which are mutawatir. And the majority of them are not even sahih. They're not even deemed acceptable, let alone certain knowledge. That's like the biggest joke there is. And this is why Ibn Hazm ripped this to shreds. That it's such a joke. And the funny thing is that really tawatur was nothing to do with hadith. It was a discussion of theology, that how do we come to know things to be certain. This really crept in slightly with Khatib al-Baghdadi, but then it really comes in with Ibn Salah. And I've mentioned this before, that Ibn Salah, may Allah have mercy on him, the damage he did to Islam. Some people, they do damage by doing a service. So he did a great service to hadith, but with his service, boy, he really did some damage to this ummah. Him, and then after him, Ibn Hajar. So these two, the tag team of Ibn Salah and Ibn Hajar, may Allah have mercy on them. They were great scholars, but they put Islam in the intensive care unit, because the damage they did by pushing this belief of the way everything became about, everything, it was like this it was like this Shafi'ization of the understanding of the deen. Everything became super rigid hadith centered, and they changed. Hadith dogmatism comes from them. I'm sure people before them had it as well, but these guys concretized this whole thing, and people after them just all accepted it. So everything suffered, and hence they started saying stupid stuff. Ibn Salah started saying stuff like, oh, if you get Sahih Muslim and Sahihain, any hadith in Sahihain is now, we consider it to be on the same level as the Quran. It is qat'i. He started to say things like this. And then Ibn Hajar said, yep, I rubber stamped that. And then people, for some reason, became so intimidated, they started to say, yeah. And then in the last century, the Salafis whatever was missing, the Salafis kind of filled that. So just as this thought was kind of like decaying away, the Salafis were like, hold your horses, we got this. And they just really put the nails in the coffin. And this deen has really been, it's comatose. It's in a coma because of the service of these scholars like Ibn Hajar and Ibn Salah, who were great scholars. Don't get me wrong, they were great scholars, but their ideas were pious. I'm sure in their own way they were righteous, but they, regardless of being righteous, they were dogmatists, like fanatic dogmatists when it came to how you handle scripture. And their thing just spread like a virus. And then I suppose it's people to be blamed. Why did people accept their views? And these are the same people, by the way, Ibn Hajar, who said the satanic verses are acceptable. So why? Because they were so hell-bent on proving this dogmatism that they didn't even care about what they were handling. So, right, people, what else? Let's take some questions. People have... Can there be yaqeen in hadith? There can never be yaqeen, but there can be good enough knowledge. So, I'm just trying to... What is going on, people? God damn. When you're trying to log in and keeps going back to all these, I gotta post this password and that password and all these passwords on my phone. There's like double, triple layer security on this, people. Right, so let me just, obviously there needs to be security. Right, so let me just get to the questions. Right, okay, I'm just getting in there. Is there no chat moderation? Right, people, keep it to the questions. The admin ought to be online. Obviously, I can't check whilst I'm online myself, but somebody saying dodgy moves. No, why dodgy? Obviously, you gotta, otherwise... Otherwise, all my wives will be killing each other. Not. It's a joke. It's a joke, people. It's a joke. Right. Okay. Ibn Abbas once was asked about the verse, "It is Allah who created the 7 heavens and the earth, and the likes of them." He replied, 7 earths. In every earth is a prophet like your prophet, and Adam like your Adam, Abraham like your Abraham. How should we understand this if Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the seal of prophets? Right. So now, people, right, this hadith, are there multi-verses? Are there, I don't know, all these different universes out there? There may be multiverses, I don't know. I mean, some theories are inclined towards that. Is it possible that there is life and prophets out there? I feel it is possible. If there is life, then it's possible that there will be prophets out there. That is possible. Right, so the question is, if there's prophets out there, could they have a prophet that comes? Of course, I mean, they would have prophets. How does that line with the prophets in our galaxy, in our universe? Well, it doesn't align at all. It's nothing to do with this. I mean, we are here. We are sapiens. We have our system. We have our rules, our thing. It's nothing to do with... That's just a hypothetical discussion. That if there were universes, would God have come... first of all, if there were universes, point one, multiverses. Okay, perhaps, we don't know. If on these multi-universes, in these multiverses, is there life? Perhaps, we don't know. If there is life, okay, given that, in those, because there is in this one, would God have communicated with them? Most likely. If he had communicated, would have he sent messengers? Most likely. We don't know. If he did send messengers, would they have to be in the same timeline as our messengers, and would they have to be communicating with us? Or no, it's nothing to do with us. This is all hypothesis, all very hypothetical kind of stuff. Has no real relevance to the real world in which we live. Right, so next question. The atheist Quran. Can you speak about this in the next episode? I'll have to check out that link. I don't know what that is. Can we eat chips from a non-halal chippy? Salma Khan asks. Isn't it the non-halal chips that always taste the best? Joke. Duh. Joking. I'm joking. Why is it Muslims weren't given a sense of humor? It's like, I don't know, like, especially the religious people. It's like the moment people become religious, the first thing they lose is their sense of humor. They become like, so you must take the pledge, and from here forth, you must act like an emo. Just be depressed. Just gonna die and burn. We're just gonna die and burn. We're just gonna die and burn. It's like, bro, do you mind toning down your, you're bringing too much spirit to the table here. So we need to tone that down. Right, so what else are we looking at? What's this? Yes, of course we can eat chips from a chippy, regardless of whether they're Muslim or not. And the question here is, let me add to the question. The question here is, what if they use the same oil? Toba, 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 astaghfirullah, toba, astaghfar. Same oil, God forbid. Don't they know better that they ought to have a separate halal oil? So basically what people are asking about is that there is cross-contamination. So they're putting, I don't know, let's say a sausage in, I don't know whether they use the same oil for sausage. People with chip shop knowledge would know better. But I'm assuming they fry other things in there that are not halal. Non-halal meat also is contaminated. I take it this is the question. So in this oil, if things are kind of, I don't know, if they're frying something, there's a chance, a small amount of things maybe in the oil, and when you put chips in there and things like this. Even if they did, like, I know there was a question about, I think, McDonald's, and they said, well, the oil we fry this in, we also fry some other things in there. And we don't use separate oil or something like this. And then there was some question, that means we can't eat fries from McDonald's or from KFC and stuff like this. And the answer, people, the answer, la respuesta, the answer is... I was once saying that, imagine a person, it's just, once I tell you this, your life, I'm just going to tell you these words, your life is going to be made. And these are and then he just dies. It reminds me of that clip from that old man from Pakistan, which is on YouTube. It's like one of those meme clips where he's pretending to have a heart attack with the news reporter. It's like, he's doing so much drama. It's just like... And then as the cameraman moves, he goes... Right, so the answer to this is, people, it's okay. even if they did use the oil at times for other things, in my understanding, and I say my understanding, and you know, some of these people say, Astaghfirullah, he's saying in his understanding, I don't want his understanding. Right there, sorry. Astaghfirullah. Astaghfirullah, he's saying his understanding, I want the Quran and Sunnah, any. I need one of those filters, you know, those faces to come on when I do that. So now I say my understanding because I'm trying to be honest with you. I'm trying to be transparent, right? Because ultimately everybody is just presenting their understanding of the Quran and Sunnah. Okay? They're just saying, so when you get these Salafi sheikhs saying, you know, this is what the Quran, this is what the Sunnah says, it's just their understanding. It doesn't necessarily mean that the Sunnah says that. In fact, on most things, it doesn't say that. You know, when they say all these kind of wacko stuff, it's just their understanding. I'm just being honest. I find that a sense of academic integrity to say, look, in my understanding. And they were criticizing me. Why does he say, in my understanding? He ought to say, Allah says in the Quran. Any, it's Sahih, any. Sorry, am I acting like an inbred? Right, well, wait, well, my parents' cousins. They weren't, alhamdulillah. I'll have to verify it now. Dad? Sure, you weren't cousins? Right, so the answer is that, look, these things don't matter. Why? Let me get to it. Look, things like grease or contamination like this, if we in the Quran are told that you can eat from the homes of Ahlul Kitab, you can eat their meat, you can go to their homes and eat their food. And in the time of the Prophet, including the Prophet and the companions, they ate meals prepared by Ahlul Kitab, by Jewish people, or by whoever. But they ate, and Christians, Jews and Christians, companions did eat from Christians, and the Prophet definitely from there's narrations about Jewish invites, but Muslims in whole accept that there is no problem in eating meals prepared by Christians. So let me get this right. If you went to a Christian house 1,000 years ago and he prepared a meal for you, right? How do you think they were washing their utensils? How do you think they were using their oils and the things that they were using? The grease that they used to use to cook food with. How do you think they were? You think really that they had separate utensils just because they invited their Muslim neighbor? Never. Of course they didn't. That's stupid. You think they were using different kind of, we're going to have a different kind of like an oil extract, a greasing agent. We're going to use something different because it was Muslims. No. They were just using the same utensils. And if let's say you've cooked a stew or something, you've cooked pork or in a particular pot, just washing it the way they did, it was certain that it would leave certain flavorings or it would leave a certain amount of grease. It would have left these things. And Muslims were allowed to eat from their homes. So when they cooked beef for Muslims or cooked chicken for Muslims, they were using the same utensils. And the Quran never said, but by the way, you're allowed to eat, but make sure they have a separate utensil. That never happened. So it's common sense. And if you read from the time of the Prophet, their utensils used to flavor things. hence there's a hadith in Abu Dawood that the Prophet, one of the utensils for water was a copper utensil, and it would leave a flavor in the water. So hence from here, the Malikiya, they use this as an evidence to say that water, when it's flavored slightly by things like, let's say you heat it in a particular place, or you do, it has that kind of, I'm using the term flavor, but not in a good way, but it takes on a little taste from the container or the vessel or wherever it's found. That is okay. They say it doesn't contaminate the water. You can still use that water. And one of the dalils they use is the fact that the Prophet's own, one of his vessels for water was made from sufar, and that it would leave a taste. So I mean, this is my this is how I've highlighted that. Look, it's impossible that you do, and that you become obsessive in saying, well, you know, when you cooked my meal, did you use the same butter? Was it the same? You know, was the utensil, I mean, did you remove every speck of grease, or did it contaminate it? And so if that wasn't, you know, the case, then it is definitely halal to consume the food. And the meat of the Christians, it is generally, I mean, if they are Christians, that is, it is deemed halal. That doesn't mean necessarily places like McDonald's or stuff like this, because I don't think in general these are Christian places. But if they were, let's say they were, or wherever, if you're in a place where there were predominantly Christians, actual Christians, then fine. I'm not saying that's what you should rely on, but it isn't haram according to the Quran. Okay, and in fact, it's interesting because Qadi Abu Bakr ibn Arabi, who was the Maliki legend and the great scholar of Muslim Spain over 900 years ago, he would write that, and he gave the fatwa that the Christians don't need to slaughter food the way we slaughter food. Because in his day and age, some of the Christians just started to kind of like snap the neck of chickens. As horrible as that sounds. As horrible as it sounds, it doesn't look that horrible when it's a really tasty burger. Not, okay, vegans, relax. I've got nothing against you. I'm just saying, as horrible as it sounds, but the burger sure as hell tastes so good. It's like, right, so anyway, so the Christians in medieval Europe, when Qadi Abu Bakr ibn Arabi, the Maliki, when Spain was Muslim, and he was from Muslim Spain, and he was a judge and a great scholar of Hadith and master of Hadith. So in his time, the Christians began to just snap the necks. They never used to, because in the early days they would slaughter as well, and in many places I'm sure they did, and the Jews would slaughter, and they still do, and Muslims would slaughter. But the Christians in Europe in his time started to just like layul unuq, they would just snap the neck of the chickens. So he was asked, can we still eat their meat? Or they would just, or for example, they would just one chop and take the neck off the chicken. He said that so long as it is halal in their deen, we can eat it. And that was a controversial fatwa of Qadi Abu Bakr ibn Arabi. But it was an interesting fatwa, because put the fatwa aside, what I'm more intrigued in is the way he's thinking. You see, because he's thinking that at the end of the day, Allah has said, you know, you can eat from these people. If their understanding develops with the day and age, and they accept that, the church accepts that, then who are we to question their faith? That was his point. And I found it very interesting. So I just thought I'd share that. Did the Prophet protect the pictures of Jesus in the Kaaba? You know, I heard this somewhere. I want to check it up. I'm not sure whether that's a very weak narration. I've got to look into it. I did come across one or two narrations that when the Prophet had the idols removed from the Kaaba, there was the Madonna, the statue of Mary holding the baby Jesus, and that the Prophet didn't destroy that idol. That people say out of kind of, not out of belief, but out of kind of a respect for just not it being an idol, but for the concept of what it was trying to represent. I read this somewhere. It sounded I won't lie, it sounds very odd. And I did think to myself, I'm going to check out the actual chains and things like this. But as with life, I got distracted. So I didn't get round to it. So perhaps... right, so I will look into that, inshallah. Right, so what else is going on, people? What else? What's this? Shall we take a look at this Sulaiman alayhi salam and the story of the throne of Bilqis? Right, so people, the throne of Bilqis, the queen of Sheba. All right, people, all right. So, what is all of this about? And why am I even speaking about these stories? So, I want to use part of this story, the throne of the Queen of Sheba. And I want to really touch a greater discourse. And that is, how do we handle stories in the Quran? How do we engage, is a better word, with stories in the Quran? Then they say, why does Mufti swear? That's a joke, people. It's a joke. All right, so I can't believe somebody from Facebook is trying to bloody call me whilst I'm on Facebook Live. God damn it. Why do we have to have a disproportionate number of retards in this ummah? It's just unfair. It's not fair. Why do non-Muslims get all the clever people or they get normal people and we get a disproportionate number of challenged? Anyway, so right, sorry, let me return to where I was. How do we engage with the stories in the Quran? Because I think there's many ways to engage with stories. Okay. Now, storytelling is one of the greatest of human arts, really. It is solely a human trait. And it is something we have been doing since the cognitive revolution, right? So human beings have this unique gift to be able to tell stories and bring to life lessons through those stories, and also relate actual stories and accounts as well. And this has been the means for information for so long, for millennia on end. Now, right, okay, so there's certain ways when we approach the Quran, and there's loads of stories in the Quran, stories about Moses, about prophets, especially about Adam, about Jesus, about Abraham, about Sulaiman alayhi salam, about Dawood, about all these amazing, beautiful, intense sometimes stories in the Quran, and how do we engage with them? So at one layer, there is the level of where we're intrigued, and that's good. So we read it as a story. So if people read, that Allah is telling, like, نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ, the best of things to be relayed, and the story of Joseph and his suffering and how he rises to power, and that's an amazing story as a narrative, for example. Then we can extract lessons from this. That's amazing as well. And these are all definitely things which I advise and promote. So we could read the story of Joseph, of Yusuf alayhi salam, and we could learn about suffering, about consequences, about how Allah has a greater plan, how things unfold, all of these things, and we can learn about that. And that's things we should do. The other then comes the layer that some of these stories have been mentioned in ways at times that suggest, I'm using the word here, suggest. They don't usually explicitly say so, but they tend to suggest a very supernatural thing to them. How do we go about, what do we do once we read these super suggested? We infer, so it can imply and we can infer. Yeah, so we infer from its almost supernatural powers and events. And how do we respond to that? How do we engage that? One way of engaging it is to say, well, that means these people all had superpowers. Like in myths, for example, mythologies. Like we could take the story of the ancient Greek kind of people of Zeus, for example, and I was relaying a story the other day about Prometheus, and how Prometheus is the person who fashions man. He creates man, and he's tasked to do that, and he has this affinity with man. And then the gods get upset with, they feel kind of like they've been done over by Prometheus, so they take away fire from man. And Prometheus, he goes and he steals fire and gives it back to man. He redeems it for them, and then he is punished. He's punished in a very painful kind of way, where something comes and eats at his liver every day, and this carries on for an eternity until he is then saved by part man, I believe, if it's Heracles or whoever it is that comes and saves him. Now this is a story, it's a kind of myth, okay? And man, I was saying this the other day, that man is then, you see, because man is kind of lonely, he is sent Pandora, the woman. And Pandora brings with her a box. So it's really interesting, those of you that have heard the term Pandora's box, for like a box of evil. So the Zeus and the gods had kind of they had instructed that basically man is done over, so he's given this, Pandora brings this box and he's told not to open it. But then what does man do? He opens it. You see, there's a lot of parallels with, I suppose, the story of Adam and the Garden of Eden, and not to eat the fruit and not to open Pandora's box, but he does open it. And when man opens the box, out of it comes wrath and disease and illness and ill fate, and all these things emerge from Pandora's box. And at the end, but the flip side is right at the bottom of the box is hope, and that too emerges, and man then has hope. But the point is, it's an interesting story, with parallels in other religions as well. Obviously, I mean, this is from the Greek mythology, Greek myths. But you have, my point is, how do you approach these stories? Now, this story, if I told you, you would just approach it as a myth. You would say, yeah, in this story, these people have superpowers, they do all these things, but you're not taking it to be real. Like, maybe you can learn lessons from it, but you're not taking it as a kind of like, oh, this is real. Same thing with Hinduism. If you looked in Hindu stories, so for example, speaking of the first man, there's a story in I think it's in the Puranas, or it's in the old, the Hindu kind of Vedic stories about how Vishnu, I believe, that the first man they call Manu. That's in Hindu tradition. The first man is referred to as Manu, and then from him come mankind. And Vishnu, the Lord, the God, appears to him as a fish, a kind of struggling fish. So Manu helps this fish, and he takes him out of his thing and puts him in a larger amount of water. And then this fish, he feeds him, and the fish starts to grow, and that's Vishnu growing. And then Manu has a good heart, and he realizes, look, he's struggling, let me put him in a greater amount of water. And then he starts to struggle there, And he grows and grows, and then eventually he becomes so big that he puts him in an ocean, and he's so big for the ocean that Manu is then told to build out of, because he's been so kind, he's told to build a boat. And he builds a boat, and then a flood comes that drowns the world or people. Once again, a stark resemblance to the story of Noah in the Bible and the Quran. So then the whole point was that here, because of his kindness to Vishnu, he is then guided, and he's on this boat and he's saved. And then from him come mankind. Now, when you read the story of Manu or Vishnu or these things, or of Prometheus, we take them as stories. We don't think that these were, we're not trying to be realistic with that. The issue is when we read certain stories in the Quran that don't state but imply a supernatural prowess or power or capacity or capabilities, how should we be? So some Muslims just say, no, these are supernatural powers and these people had supernatural powers. So Jesus, for example, would speak as a baby. Normal people can't do that, but it's okay. Jesus can speak as a baby because he has special powers. He's like a special powerful person, so he can do things. So what they do is they accept reality, but then they just, for this part, they will suspend reality and say, I know in the real world people can't do this, but here they did it because God made him do it. So this is how many Muslims approach these things. The problem with this approach of then taking a very supernatural is it doesn't correlate with reality. And it has huge problems once you zoom out. Because once you zoom out, then everything can fall to pieces. So, because if you're going to say, well, these things can't happen. And they say, yeah, but I know they can't happen, but God did them here. So, well, so that means, like, God, fine. So why does anything have to make sense then? Because God could, it's like the Trinity. You could say, well, I know normally 3 doesn't equal 1, but God here made 3 equal 1. You're saying God made a baby talk like grown-ups, and you're saying God made a man fly and do all these things, and you're saying this, so God, and you accept it doesn't normally happen. So, but, God made it happen here. So God made the 3 Trinity he made himself be 3. I know it's against reason, but you yourself are not accepting reason. So you see, this becomes the problem. That, you see, if we take the supernatural, the mythological thing as a real, then reason has to be ditched. If reason is ditched, then we have no right to discredit, for example, the mythologies of Hinduism or Greek mythologies. We have no right because God did it. So God did these things. So in that case, how can we say, Prometheus didn't create man and he didn't, or Vishnu wasn't the fish? Because we'd say, yeah, I know that doesn't normally happen, but hey, God did it. So what I'm trying to say is reason is either all in or it's out. It doesn't happen. Like, you can't say, you know what, I'll follow reason 90% of the time. That doesn't make any sense. Right? So what I'm trying to say is that Allah in the universe has set laws. These laws have to be defined. Allah says, وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا. You'll never find the laws of God, the laws of nature, to deviate and change. That they work. Gravity always works. You see, if somebody said, I know gravity works, I won't stand at the edge of a cliff and jump off. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that to my child. I wouldn't do that for myself. But yet, on one occasion, God allowed one man to defy gravity, for example. Not that. Or God allowed a group of men to defy gravity, but normally he doesn't. this logic, it doesn't just shoot you in one foot, it completely buries you, because you can then no longer find any fault with any mythology. So now I'm coming back to the stories. I'm not saying the stories were mythical. I'm not saying that. I do believe that these were actually real people. I believe all these people were real. I do believe that there was an Adam, there was an Abraham, there was a Noah. I believe in all these people. The question is, what were the surahs exactly saying? So we have to visit it with this in mind. If we want to take something real away from it. If we want to just read it as a story to extract other lessons and just read it like a narrative, then fine. But if we want to get real, we've got to do a bit of sometimes, like, it's like we're approaching a scene as a detective. I mean, I'm giving an example. Okay. So imagine a detective comes to a scene and he has a clear open shut case. Like he has a person and they say, look, here's the person, and there's been a homicide, there's been a murder, and this person was clearly holding the gun when we got there. And it's a clear open shut case. But the problem is there is no motive. And in fact, it's too convenient. The whole thing is way too convenient. And it's at these places that detectives will say, well, it's too, there's more. I know it immediately makes sense, but when we zoom out, it doesn't make sense, because this person, for example, that's the worst way to do it. He could have done it in 100 other ways and got away with it. Why would he do it in such a stupid way and still stand there and do this? It doesn't make sense. So this, in a similar way, that kind of thinking cap has to be applied with these surahs, that yes, we can just read them like this and say superpowers, supernatural stuff, doesn't matter. But when we zoom out, there's a problem. It doesn't make sense like that. Okay, so let's take a look at, for example, the story of the throne of the Queen of Sheba. So, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Now, in this story, it's actually very interesting. I won't go through the whole story thing, but I'll focus on the verses to do with the throne of the Queen of Sheba. Now, the Quran doesn't mention her name, but Muslim sources generally say her name was Bilqis. Allahu A'lam, but she was the Queen of Sheba. But one of the things that is interesting is how the Quran portrays her as a woman of immense power, beneath whom the administration and the ministers are all men. Now, the Quran does not rebuke her in any sense for that power. This is an interesting lesson to be taken from that story. So when Hudhud says, Inni wajadtu imra'atan tamlikuhum, that I found a woman that owned them. She owned these people. They were her subjects. Wa utiyat min kulli shay, and she has been given everything. وَلَهَا عَرْشٌ عَظِيمٌ. And above all, what stood out for me was her majestic throne. So this is an amazing kind of an account of a woman with great, immense power being told to Solomon. Now, Sulaiman alayhi salam held one of the most powerful kingdoms in his time on earth. And it was so powerful that, and if you just look at the gold, that the kind of gold reserves that he had, and gold that was reaching him and stuff like this, and even till today they don't know, they have certain traces of from the region of Ophir, and they don't know where this region was, and there's been a gold hunt trying to discover it because he was receiving a lot of gold from that region. So Hudhud, and just to kind of touch up here, it's interesting, this isn't my point, but I know a lot of people have asked me, who was Hudhud, or what was Hudhud? Now, in this verse of the Quran, it mentions that Sulaiman alayhi salam, he says, وَتَفَقَّدَ الطَّيْرَ فَقَالَ مَا لِي. So he one day misses this tayr, and tayr can mean a kind of bird or a watch. It can mean something like this because it's a collective noun that's being used. فَقَالَ مَا لِي لَا أَرَى الْهُدْهُدَ أَمْ كَانَ مِنَ الْغَائِبِينَ. Now people say it was a bird. So he had this little kind of bird that would fly around, and he's talking about this bird. The interesting thing is the verb that is used and then says kana minal ghaibin. Ghaibin is used for human beings only. It is not used for animals. Like the plural that is used like in, like muslimin, mu'minin, like kafirin, for example. This in or the un in the nominative case is not used for animals. It is only used for humans. And it says, Am kana min al-ghaibin, is he from the people that are absent? Where is he? And then he says that, look, لَأُعَذِّبَنَّهُ عَذَابًا شَدِيدًا, that he says, I will punish him. أَوْ لَأَذْبَحَنَّهُ أَوْ لَيَأْتِيَنِّي بِسُلْطَانٍ مُبِينٍ. He says, I'm going to punish, I'm going to slaughter this person. And this is, him using the word here, slaughter, is what led a lot of Muslims into thinking it's a bird as well. This, as well as the word tayr, it reinforced for them that slaughter. Right, so, but that was just his figurative statement, that this person had a responsibility. Now, great legends like Molana Abdul Karim al-Athari, who was from India, in his tafsir, from the Indo-Pak region, in his tafsir, I'm just putting this on, in his tafsir al-Urwatul Wuthqa, in line with certain other mufassirin as well, say that this was actually a branch, that Tayr was a branch of people that Sulaiman alayhi salam had under his command that were equivalent to modern day intelligentsia. Hence he called them birds, like falcon, like eagles. They were his people that would bring him information about other kingdoms. Now he says that that's his tafsir, in his tafsir, it is something that does make sense given the kind of constant verbs that are used referring to human beings. So for example, when Hudhud comes فَمَكَثَ غَيْرَ بَعِيدٍ فَقَالَ أَحَطْتُ بِمَا لَمْ تُحِطْ بِهِ وَجِئْتُكَ مِنْ سَبَإٍ بِنَبَإٍ يَقِينٍ. Now he says that, look, he comes back and he says that he stays slightly at a distance, and he says to Sulaiman alayhi salam, look, I've come with some information about the people of Sheba. If this was a bird, the problem when we zoom out is we're saying a bird has cognition. We're saying a bird has intelligence. We're saying a bird has not just animal intelligence, but it has the intelligence to analyze, to assess, to synthesize information, to relay information, to recognize what kingdoms mean, to recognize these kind of concepts. That if you zoom out, is a problem, because animals are not mukallaf. They don't have these kind of capacities. So you see, this is what I'm saying with the zoom in, zoom out problem. If you take this to be a bird, but if, as Molana Abdul Karim al-Athari said, that this was a person Hudhud, and this was his intelligence, his intelligentsia, so the person was responsible, and hence such an important figure was missing, and hence Sulaiman alayhi salam was incredibly angry. And that's in his tafsir. He then goes on to relay what he saw. And I saw وَجَدْتُهَا وَقَوْمَهَا يَسْجُدُونَ لِلشَّمْسِ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ, that these people were bowing down to the sun, that they were prostrating to the sun. وَزَيَّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَعْمَالَهُمْ فَصَدَّهُمْ عَنِ السَّبِيلِ فَهُمْ لَا يَهْتَدُونَ. That he says the shaitan has misled them and they have turned away from God. Once again, saying an animal has these kind of psychosocial constructs that are human constructs. These things don't exist. Okay. So, and then, you see, we could zoom in and just pretend it's a mythology. Well, God, I know animals don't have human social construct, but God made this bird have it. And then you zoom out and you say, well, so what's your problem with the elephant god in Hinduism? Why is that all of a sudden so counter reason? If they said, well, God made him have it. You say, no, but that doesn't make any sense. Really? And a bird doing all this does make sense. So you see, when you zoom out, you have a problem. When you zoom in, you're just so immersed, it doesn't matter. You're just reading it as a narrative. So he then goes on to say, he describes, now listen once again, what does Sulaiman alayhi salam address him? قال سننظر أصدقت أم كنت من الكاذبين. Once again, كاذبين, the plural only used for humans. He says, I will see whether you are truthful or you are you are from the people who lie. People who lie. Birds are not from people. And then, is a bird, once again, a bird knows how to lie. It understands human concepts. It has theory of mind. It recognizes that I'm deceiving somebody. It recognizes these things. Right, so it's problematic saying this is a bird. Nevertheless, Sulaiman alayhi salam writes to the queen of Sheba. He writes to her, sends her, and then she kind of consults with her people saying, what do you think? And they say that, we can fight him or whatever you wish. And it's interesting, she mentions, قالت إن الملوك إذا دخلوا قرية أفسدوها وجعلوا عزة أهلها أذلة وكذلك يفعلون. I always found this verse incredibly interesting. That she says that, look, kings, whenever they come to because she asks them, what do you think we should do? And they say, نحن أولي بأس, we are people of power and strength, like bring it on, let him come. And she says that whenever kings enter a town, all they do is ruin it and spread corruption. It's really fascinating because from this verse we can it opens a separate tangential, on a tangent, a discussion on political philosophy. That what gives human beings the right to rule over another human being? Where did this concept of kingship even come from? Who said that one person has the right to be a king? Who? Why how do we become? Where did that come from? Why do we have to accept it? That, he's a human, we're a human. How does that إن الملوك إذا دخلوا قرية أفسدوها, that kings, if they enter a town, they only spread fasad. وكذلك يفعلون. But yet this has been, the three things that have set man on this journey of ultimate unification has been God, king, and money. And and then the thing is that, where did this even come from? That one human one day felt, I have the right to subjugate, and you guys are my subjects. Some person just assumed that one day, and it became a human legacy. I find that so fascinating, the way this verse kind of touches up on this notion. And then it goes on about she kind of liaises with Sulaiman alayhi salam, and then she eventually decides to kind of come to him, bring a delegation and come to Sulaiman alayhi salam. Now the interesting thing is, then comes the verse. قال, this is Sulaiman alayhi salam. يا أيها الملأ أيكم يأتيني بعرشها قبل أن يأتوني مسلمين. That who will bring her throne to me before they reach us? So they've set off from where they are. It's going to take a good while before they come. Obviously back then. So who can bring me the throne? Because Hudhud had praised. He said, Utiyat min kulli shay. She's been given everything. And after saying everything, he said, Walaha arshun. He said, but God damn, that throne, that is something. You see now, so what kind of the pinnacle, almost a landmark of her majesty was this amazing throne that she had. Just as in the time of the British and the East India Company, you see the peacock throne of the Mughal dynasty in India became like an emblem. It became symbolic of the great majesty of the Mughals, and hence they wanted the peacock throne. This was something that they were like, we've heard so much about this throne, we want the peacock throne, I suppose. And then there's the Game of Thrones. with its kind of throne in there. But the point is that thrones sometimes are so powerful like this. People want them. Now, the question with this verse is, قَالَ عِفْرِيتٌ مِّنَ الْجِنِّ. The ifrit from the jinn, and I'm going to come to this, said, أَنَا آتِيكَ بِهِ قَبْلَ أَن تَقُومَ مِن مَقَامِكَ. Before you stand from your maqam, I will bring it. وَإِنِّي عَلَيْهِ لَقَوِيٌّ أَمِينٌ. Indeed, I have the capacity to get that done. What is Sulaiman alayhi salam talking about? We're at a crossroad, people. One group of people that have zoomed in, they're reading, who can bring me her actual throne? And they're reading that a jinn, as in mystical demons, like these characters that we can't see, the jinn have said to Sulaiman alayhi salam that one of them, who's called Ifrit, which is like a powerful person, or powerful jinn, I suppose, by this narrative, by this group, he's saying, I will bring it before you stand up. This is how it went. See, that, in my understanding, doesn't make much sense, and I'll tell you why in a moment, because we're zooming out and taking a look. Molana Abdul Karim al-Athari, in his tafsir, and other people have said in Urwatul Wuthqa, highlights that jinn here was referring to a group of people. Does this not the jinn? And how do we know this? Because let's take a look at the verse of the Quran where Allah speaks about shaitan. Kana min al-jinn fafasaqa an amri rabbi. Yet Imam Nawawi, Qurtubi, all these people will highlight the majority of the Muslims. Surprisingly, actually I don't agree with them on that, but look, they themselves accept the majority of the Muslims do not believe, they say, that shaitan was from the jinn. They say that he was something created, and jinn here just meant a group. You can go to any tafsir, read the verse of the ayah, Kana min al-jinn, that shaitan was from the jinn, fafasaqa an amri rabbi, because jinn just means the veiled, the kind of the thing that is veiled, the kind of like a selective, something that isn't seen. So, and then there's the jinn, which are a creation, because they are also veiled from us being able to see them, as in, what are these things? They're in a total different realm. Now, most of the Mufassirin say that verse there does not mean shaitan was from that jinn. They just mean he was from something that we couldn't see, we didn't have access to. That's what they mean. And that's actually most of the Mufassirin, and they say that, surprisingly, that the majority of the Muslims accept that. So, here, Molana or Sheikh Abdul Karim al-Athari writes in his tafsir, Urwatul Wuthqa, that there was 3 groups of people that the army of Solomon were divided in 3. He had his intelligentsia, which were a unique, it's a bit like how governments today have, so, you know, they will have, so in America, they will have their CIA for foreign things. And then he had his manual army, which were the ints. He just referred to them. And ints means man. And people will say, well, duh. But even today, we refer to things as manpower. That is the manpower. He has brought the manpower. And he says, and then he had a unique, like a skill, like a group, a department that were kind of supreme. They also dealt with internal matters, but they were supreme. An example today, to say, if I was speaking about America, would be like the FBI. And you would have the normal police, you'd have the FBI, and you'd have foreign, like CIA. So this 3 division that you have, and I'm using America just because it's so popular as an example, but otherwise all governments pretty much have this in the UK, whether it's going to be the MI6, for example, I suppose MI5 looking internally, but you do also have the National Crime Agency looking internally now, and then you have the regular police force manpower. In this way, in a similar kind, not the same, but a similar kind of division, Solomon had split his kind of manpower, overall forces, and hence he had one of the most powerful kingdoms on earth in his time. This is how it's explained in the tafsir of Urwatul Wuthqa. Now, to me, that does make sense, and I'll explain. So, a powerful person from this division says, I will bring you. Now, what does bring you the throne mean? Was Sulaiman alayhi salam asking them to go get her throne? See, we zoom in, that's fine. Go get her throne. We zoom out, that's a huge problem. Why? It's theft. This is theft. We are assuming that Solomon alayhi salam is stealing the throne of another kingdom. He's just saying, because there is no war between these people, we're assuming he's saying to his people, go steal her throne. And that's okay for a prophet to instruct people to steal thrones, just to impress her. Because the reason he's going to bring the throne is just to impress her. We're going to see that in a moment. So he's going to steal it without her permission. That's, you see, you zoom out, that's a problem. You zoom in, it's like, well, okay, we're just reading it as a story. Now, what was he saying in who can bring me her throne? As in, who can bring me like unto it? Who can make, you've praised her throne so much. Bring a throne for me like that. Get it done. Who can get it done? And this person who's very capable says, I can make a throne like hers. Before you get up from this gathering, maqam, every day, what's transmitted in the scriptures is that Solomon would generally sit after sunrise, after a little while, till noon. And that was his maqam. It was a royal maqam, a royal sitting. Now, he would sit there and he would deal with people's, and the person said, in a day, before you get up, I will get this, I will make you a throne like hers. But then, listen, قال الذي عنده علم من الكتاب, a person who had the ilm, the science or the knowledge of the kitab. He said, أنا آتيك به قبل أن يرتد إليك طرفك. Before, in a glance, I will get it done for you. فلما رآه مستقرا عنده, then when Solomon saw it, قال هذا من فضل ربي ليبلوني أشكر مكفور. He said, surely this capacity God has tested me with, that will I be grateful, despite having all this power. And then he says, وَمَنْ شَكَرَ فَإِنَّمَا يَشْكُرُ لِنَفْسِهِ وَمَنْ كَفَرَ فَإِنَّ رَبِّي غَنِيٌّ كَرِيمٌ. And he says, indeed, whosoever is grateful, Allah is, he says that he's grateful for, he only does good to himself, and whoever disbelieves, and that Allah is surely rich and generous. And that's an interesting thing, but I'll just come to that in a moment. Who was this person that said to Solomon, I will get the throne? Some people, many Mufassirin have said this was a person who had knowledge from Allah, Lawh al-Mahfuz, and mystical powers, and he created it in a blink, and he created this. And zoom in, it's just it's a narrative, it's paranormal. You zoom out, and that's a problem, because these things don't happen like that. Now, what's an alternative narrative that actually makes sense? And once again, in the Tafsir Urwatul Wuthqa, Sheikh Molana Abdul Karim al-Athari, he writes that this was a person who he had detailed descriptions, this kitab, of key features of landmark, whether they were events or landmark kind of icons. He had these things. And he said, I've actually got a detailed description of this massive throne, the way like the peacock throne was described in so much detail with all its finite things, qualities to the British. In a similar way, this had been described, and he has it written. He's saying, I can make you from that. So meaning it will be spot on, not just this person saying, he can make it from his knowledge, like he's heard about it, but I have a detailed, descriptive, and people say there were drawings of it and things like this, and so I can make it like for like. And this thing of before you return to this قَبْلَ أَن يَرْتَدَّ إِلَيْكَ طَرْفُكَ, before you look at this matter again, is a figurative speech of before you look at this matter again. Not that before you blink as in literally. Because once again, that's problematic when you zoom out, because things like that don't happen. So he does create this throne. Now, Sulaiman alayhi salam is incredibly impressed with this throne. Then he says, look, قال نكروا لها عرشها ننظر أتهتدي أم تكون من الذين لا يهتدون. This is an amazing ayah because you can understand it in so many different ways. Nakiru. Many people understood here that this means, and you can take that understanding, it means disguise it. Because they believed this person went and stole her throne. And I've said before, it doesn't befit prophets to steal thrones. Okay. To me, that's a blasphemous allegation. But nevertheless, a lot of Muslims went with it. They believed that Solomon had her throne stolen and it was brought back. So he said, disguise it. Nakiru. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is he had it like for like made. But then he said, top it even further. Make it even more glorious. And he said, make it so, you know what, it's already amazing. Take it up a notch. To that extent that by doing so, نَكِّرُوا لَهَا عَرْشَهَا, that even her throne, she will belittle it when she looks at this throne. So she will nakir and tastankir عرشها بمقابل هذا العرش. That she, looking at this throne, thinks, damn, and I thought mine was good. You see, nakiru laha arsha. And I like that way of reading it. Other people took it in the other way, that he meant disguise it. But I mean, both, the verb can mean both things, so it's okay. Now, the interesting thing is, look, فَلَمَّا جَاءَتْ, when the Queen of Sheba arrives, when Bilqis arrives, assuming her name is Bilqis, she arrives, قِيلَ, you see, when you arrive at a royal palace in the past, you had to come into a waiting area. You arrive and then you are received, like you're kind of like brought in. And the fascinating thing is, you see, فَلَمَّا جَاءَتْ, it is said to her, Solomon doesn't say it, it is said to her that, you know, take a seat. And then she's asked, is your throne also like this? أَهَكَذَا عَرْشُكِ? You know, like that. You see, some Muslims understood from this that he's saying, oh, is this like your throne, by the way? And she's saying, yeah, it's kind of like it. That to me is a bit of a kind of dull understanding. See, the other understanding is it's said in a diplomatic, but there's a hint of kind of like, you know, this is just the waiting room. This isn't even where the king sits. That's inside. This is just where the guests sit. And is your throne, by the way, is your throne like this? And she says, كأنه. More or less. That it's more or less like that. Because, you see, the whole point was, she saw that, damn, and one of my best landmark icons is my throne, and they have one which tops that, and it's just in the waiting area. That, wow, you understand? And so she responds, كأنه, you know, it's like this, more or less. She doesn't say it is it, because even she feels like, damn, you know, because she doesn't want to say it's below it or it is exactly like it. She just says, perhaps. وَأُوتِينَا الْعِلْمَ مِنْ قَبْلِهَا وَكُنَّا مُسْلِمِينَ. And then she's invited to enter the palace of Solomon. فَقِيلَ لَهُ ادْخُلِ السَّرَحِ. And it's so majestic that when she steps in, she thinks it's water. فَلَمَّا رَأَتْهُ حَسِبَتْهُ لُجَّةً وَكَشَفَتْ عَنْ سَاقَيْهَا. So she lifts up her dress to kind of, because she thinks she's stepping into water. And he says, إِنَّهُ صَرْحٌ مُمَرَّدٌ مِنْ قَوَارِيرٍ. He says it's just glass, that it's not water. And then she eventually becomes Muslim. And the story states that generally, as far as I'm aware, that she marries Solomon. But that has another interesting point in it, by the way, that, you know, people say, oh my God, how did she reveal her lower legs? And oh my God, and what's this about? And then the Mufassirin have had to kind of do acrobats to to justify that story. But look, it is what it is. And, you know, and the whole point is that this is, in the Quran, it's stating that. Obviously, if it was an obscenity, then it wouldn't be stated in the Quran and it wouldn't be happening in front of prophets. But the point is that this whole story, the reason I mentioned this story is just to kind of highlight that when we approach the Quran, we have different ways. We can either take things as mythology, as kind of like myths, paranormal events, or we can zoom out and take a holistic picture. And I would advise that we do take a holistic picture. Another good example that is given often is, another story that often comes up is Jesus in the cradle. Now, that when Mary comes to the people bringing Jesus with her. This is the verse of the Quran. And many people assume that at this point Jesus is a little baby. They're assuming this. They assume that the people are accusing her of adultery, although in the Quran it doesn't mention anywhere that her people ever accused Mary of adultery. That doesn't say. Later people did, like hundreds of years later they did, but in Mary's time, when she arrives with Jesus, they didn't. Now the question is, when Mary alayhi salam arrives with Jesus, how old is Jesus? Now one good thing would, you see, if we're just zooming in, we can just read it as a story, like, oh, and it doesn't state, but it implies that maybe he's a baby. She's saying she brought him, she carries, what does tahmiluhu, you know, like bring. Now tahmilu can mean carry on, like horseback or on a donkey or on something. It can, like in the Quran it comes that when the people come to you, to the Prophet, litahmilahum, so that you can carry them. It doesn't mean, that's a verse of the Quran, it doesn't mean that the Prophet would carry these people. It meant that you take them on the camels. So it can mean that, or it can mean physically carrying. Now many Muslims have gone with the fact that this here was Jesus as a baby. But what they didn't do is look at the Christian sources. Because look, Jesus is an incredible figure of the past to other communities who also speak about him. Now, about Jesus alayhi salam, we know that when Jesus is born, he doesn't, I mean, I know they take him to Jerusalem for the quick, within the 40 days, the ritual. But then Jesus, according to certain narrations, he's taken to Egypt because of King Herod the Great. He was kind of butchering all babies or baby boys under a certain age. So they take Jesus away to Egypt. And then he returns after a few years. Does the Bible speak of Jesus coming to Jerusalem? Now, most likely, Jesus would have, once he returned to Judea or the Middle East, he would have visited Jerusalem often, especially since it was a pilgrimage to do so at least 3 times in a year, the Passover and so on, that all Jewish males, once they were of a certain age, would visit. Now, the interesting thing is the Gospel of Luke actually does have a narration of when Jesus is around 12 years old. What's interesting is that he is brought to Jerusalem, and then when she has brought him, in the Gospel of Luke, when she is heading back, they realize in the journey, just into the journey, that Jesus is missing. So she searches for Jesus. She comes back and searches for 3 days, it says. And eventually Mary is incredibly stressed out with not being able to find Jesus, as you can imagine, her baby, I mean, she's lost him. She eventually finds him in the temple. She finds him in the temple of Jerusalem debating the elders. You see, now that's really interesting. It's fascinating because, you see, in the verse of the Quran, when Mary approaches these people, they say to her, what have you brought? You know, your father was a decent man, your mother was a decent man. What kind of child is this? Which many Muslims wrongly assumed was speaking about adultery. Now, once again, this is why I do like this tafsir of Molana Abdul Karim al-Athari. He highlights this very same point. He highlights that this was actually Jesus, as stated in the Gospel of Luke. He had been there for a few days and he had been trying to debate some of these elders in their understanding. And naturally, they were annoyed. They didn't even like grown men debating them, let alone a bloody child to them, thinking that their attitude was, this is just a bloody child. Why should we listen to? They wouldn't listen to men. So when she says that, look, you know, like, why, don't blame me, like, speak to him, like, what has he said? And they say, you know, كيف نكلم من كان في المهد صبيا? How can we speak who was just in a cradle? He was in a cradle, just a little boy. You want us to speak to a little boy now? We are the high priests of the Temple of Jerusalem. To me, that interpretation fits with the reality. It fits with, you see, when we zoom out, it still fits. The problem with the other one is we can read it, and then Jesus said to them, look, Inni Abdullah, I am the servant of God. That he has blessed me, he has made me kind to my mother, he has made me birram biwalidati. Now the thing is, this question, that why as well, why rude to my mother, you know, why stress this point? Because Mary most likely would have been a bit upset as well, because one, he was missing for 3 days according to the Gospel of Luke. And so she would have been incredibly terrified. I mean, she would have been really relieved to have found Jesus, alayhi salam, but she would have been very terrified as well, and also a bit upset that why did you disappear? And him responding in this way, and then saying that Allah has told me that we should pray and to give in alms, to give charity, and you see this message, once again telling it to the high priests, who were all about just making money. You know, because the high priests they were rinsing the people. They weren't really about giving charity and stuff. So, to me, this narrative makes a lot more sense, rather than saying, oh, look, he was a child, he spoke to them, he did this. Because when we zoom out, we know that, look, the Jews generally did not believe in Jesus from a child. And they didn't even believe in him when he was a grown-up. Now, if they'd seen a speaking baby, surely that would have affected some of the Jewish people. Surely they would have thought this is a sign. They would have believed, surely. They would have done something. I mean, babies don't speak like that, not like adults. So, to me, that doesn't add up then, because we know they didn't accept Jesus. We also know Mary was never accused of adultery in her lifetime, because if she was, she would have been killed. There was no way on earth they would have ever let Mary go, because and her being a woman was even more defenseless. They would have just killed her. The Jews, I mean, they attempted to kill Jesus, and in their version they killed him in their version. And the point is, they had that power. So to think that, oh, along comes a woman and they think this woman, and Mary wasn't from some prestigious family with all this kind of defense. She was very defenseless. If they thought she had committed adultery, they would have just stoned her to death and killed her. But that doesn't happen in reality. So when we zoom out, it doesn't add up. It's too it's too convenient, this story. You know, it doesn't add up when you step back. You know that, neither was there any miracles, neither were there any accounts of this kind of stuff, and not in what the general Christians who transmit in their version of authenticity. I know that there's questions with the authenticity, but that's my point. So I hope this sheds some light, people, on why and how I believe we should engage with narratives in the Quran, that when we step back, it should still fit. It shouldn't be something that only when we're so zoomed in, it doesn't matter. You know, oh yeah, there's flying people, Solomon is flying on a magic carpet. This is what a lot of people believe. They believe that Solomon had like a magic carpet, or some people believe he had a cloud and he used to just fly on this cloud and used to go around the world on a cloud or on a magic carpet, and this kind of stuff. And, you know, or Jesus speaking as a baby or doing these. But when you zoom out, none of these things add up. So the other narratives all add up, and they are in our tafsir. The problem is that many people don't push them. Why? Because they themselves, they're too caught up in this kind of mythological perspective that they've had since they were children, and they're not people of critical reasoning. See, this is the problem. You know, we don't have, we lack scholars who have critical reasoning. We don't have that. So cool. About Maryam alayhi salam, I do believe Maryam, in my understanding, was a prophet of God. Whatever that means, but I do believe that Maryam alayhi salam is an incredibly venerated figure, and she was a prophet of God. Right, Abdullah Mahir, right, moving on. Let's take some quick questions and bring this to an end. Abdullah Mahir is saying, is kissing wife in public haram? Abdullah Mahir, Toba, astaghfirullah. You natty. He hasn't even said it's his wife. Kissing wife, as in wife with a capital W, as in like the communal wife. Oh, I thought you were wife. I thought you're just the wife in community. So kissing, nutty. Right, I'm sure Abdullah Mahir smashed it. See, somebody so eager. Is he watching my thing in public, thinking, control nahi ho raha yaar. It's too much, you know, I can't control, you know. You know, this has been a debate, by the way. So, that scholars, because, you know, in the Gulf countries, when they meet each other, they kiss, like, they kind of kiss the cheeks, like, mwah, mwah, kind of thing. So, or they sometimes kiss the forehead with women. So many people in the haram, like in Mecca, they will, like, let's say they've met, like, let's say it could, in many cases, their wives, or sometimes other mahram, they will kiss them. The men will kiss the women, like, on the cheek thing, or on the forehead. And this has become an issue so people have debated, oh my God, is this haram or what? Or what's going on? Or in the house of God? In the house of God? Oh, sorry, wrong religion. I mean, in the house of God? Toba. Sorry, wrong religion. Toba. So this has become a debate that, oh my God, are we allowed to kiss the wife in public? And these Arabs are doing it in the haram. And personally, stuff like that, I think is no problem, stuff like that. Okay, you know, that kind of... That's just, I think anything kind of, what's the word? Anything, you see, that's not in any way some kind of like, seen by I don't think by Islamic standards that, you know, that kind of introductory, what the Arabs do and some Europeans do, that kind of kiss, or a kiss on the forehead or stuff like this. I don't think that's in any way seen really as so sexual. It's not seen as sensual. That's, sensual. It's just seen as affectionate or kind of welcoming. Obviously, if there's if there's like some deep French stuff going on, there's gonna be a problem, This one, big problem, this one dubious. If all of that is going on, he says, no. Was there anything sensual? This was just me. This was welcoming, the welcoming. Ghalti sorry. This one not nice, my friend. This one not nice. Obviously, that would be rather shocking. Especially since they meet like that with all people. And as he's moving along, and then there's a guy standing there, and they do that with the guys as well, and then there's like, huh? Ye kya ho gaya? There's this, it turns from the brotherly love, the agape turns into the eros, it's all confusing, No. So people, Masoom wants to know, what is the French stuff? What is this French? Why is it called French, by the way? What is this French? The French fries, the French toast. Well, my friend, don't worry, when you get married, this one. If you're still in doubt, I'm sure you can visit one of the local Qadi Sabs. Isn't that usually where you get your first French kiss? From the Qadi Sahab. It's like, huh? I'm joking, people, I'm joking, yeah, I'm joking. Yeah, so, right, so people, that's that. Oh, I almost forgot there's some village wars going on between the which Qadi Sahab have you met? You naughty, you want me to send you the Qadi Sahab's number? Looks like Brother Masoom isn't that Masoom after all. Is one a bit naughty, naughty. Right, so so people, what's all this going on with Sheikh, what's his name, Asrar Rashid and Osman? So they've got Asrar, Osman, oof. People, debates are going down. Let me give my quick 2 cents. I've got to, everybody's gossiping and gossiping is, it is a bit nice, this one. Well, I'm not gossiping, I'm just telling what's going on. So this person from up north called Molvi Osman has made a video calling out Asrar Rashid, which was quite hilarious, but they've taken it down now. I don't know if other people have it up. So this video said, I spoke a bit about this last week. By the way, in this archaic English, which is so funny because I really wonder, do these people think that people actually speak like that? Oh Asrar, oh Asrar, let me take you down memory lane. Oh, it's hilarious, man. So he said, oh Asrar, this, oh my Jaun, oh dear, oh goodness gracious. So Asrar had done a response to that. So in Asrar's response, he had said, he did like a really lengthy response, which, boy, I've never seen anybody evade the question to so much acrobat. He spoke about everything except the actual thing. It was so funny, oh my God. And one Asrar takes so many poses. Oh my God, he's like, and we will. You think, yaar kuch speed lagao yaar. We've got to put it on like 1.5 speed on YouTube to kind of like move it up. Yaar kuch raftar badhao yaar. So he's like, he really takes so long. And then he dodges the whole thing. And what's so hilarious is he keeps referring back to me. He goes, oh, and none of you called out this Mufti from Binori town. Bro, I just live like probably 20 minutes away from you. I live in Birmingham, yeah. This Mufti from Karachi, Binori town. I'm not from Karachi, Binori town, bro. I'm from Birmingham. He goes, I debated. Oh, Asrar doesn't have full that kind of accent, but there's a little twang. But he goes, I debated this guy. And so basically what he was saying is, why are you guys picking on me? He said, this guy said this, and he said miracles are like this, and he said this. He said, you didn't debate him. You didn't call me. This is how it actually was. Wallahi, it was so hilarious. I mean, it's boring to watch, but it was incredibly hilarious, that part. That he was just like, we pick on me. And then what was funny was Sheikh Asrar threw Molvi Yasir under the bus. So Molvi Yasir earlier on this year got into he became like a proper avid, passionate hater of mine, and he went back and forth. And you can watch my YouTube video responses to when we were referring to him as Molvi Makri because he kept using the word Makri, which it was an English word. He was trying to say the word mockery. So anyway, when I refer to him, we're given the title of Anthony Gonzalez from Umar Akbar Anthony, right? So at that time, apparently, Molvi Yasir, aka Anthony Gonzalez, he was taking help and assistance from Asrar to refute me. So this was meant to be a secret. But Asrar just threw him under the bus in this. He said, and there's a UK scholar. I will not say his name. He's a very famous Deobandi scholar. I won't say what his name is because I'm meant to keep it private. But he's part of this group. He's part of this group. And earlier on this year, he had a course at Sufa, which in Birmingham. And then he went on to refute this Mufti from Binoria. And he would phone me and ask me for advice. Nice. This one, nice. I like it, this one. So obviously, this has caused a bit of some friction now between Molvi Yasir Makri and the other group who are actually his close friends, the Al-Islam production lot. So it's all interesting. So now, and then right at the end, he said, okay, I take up the debate. But what we're going to do, we're going to meet, we're going to have pre-debate, and then we're going to have a debate in January. But before we debate, we're going to write down everything in Arabic about the Brailwi ulama, and we're going to send it to Damascus. So it's like basically saying some people are going to write to me, let's just say, and they're going to tell me about an issue in China to do with some Chinese people and some cultural issue. So, and I'm going to judge about about what's happening in China, which I've got no idea, by the way. So, yeah, so Sheikh Asrar said, okay, I want you to write this down, and we're going to send it to some ulama in Damascus. And then he went on to say, I've got a lot of Arab scholar teachers. And you know something interesting? This one interesting, this one gossip, gossip. See, what's interesting is Asrar, a while back, publicly, so it's public, this is public, yeah. This is our public relationship, this is our rishta, yeah. Otherwise, Asrar is my Jaun, yeah. So, publicly, Asrar had attacked Sheikh Yaqubi, and he cussed all the Sheikh Yaqubi followers. And he said these Yaqubi followers only are so, basically they're blind followers who are desis that are just wowed by an Arab. just because he's an Arab, he comes here and people are like all, you know, bowled over, and they're all kind of like, wow, we're not worthy, just because he's an Arab, you know, and so they become kind of blinded by these Arabs. So he's got a and he's done several talks on this, Asrar has. But what's interesting, you see, Mullah Asrar, what in this response to the Deobandi Mulvis, he himself says, oh, but I've got not one, not two, you know, I've got 15 Arab teachers, you know. He says, my teachers are Arabs. And he starts naming, you know, like Sheikh Nuruddin Aitar, and I think Farfur, and I don't know which other mashayikh he names. He names like several, and he goes, these are all great shuyukh who are like my shuyukh, by the way. And that's a bit of an irony. We're like, oh, wait a minute, you know. I'm having the deja vu, you know, the Arab, the blinded by the Arab. So this one inconsistent, you know. This one not nice, my friend. So that was like kind of a bit, I thought I'll highlight that. I thought, why not? Let's, you know, it's good to a little review on certain, you know, some masala going on, you know, the Salt Bay. So likewise, by the way, if there's ever any interesting masala going on in the ilmi religious circles, reach out to me, people. I'll do a section, I'll discuss it, you know, I'll do the Mufti Masala, that section. Right, people, it's, oh my God, is that the time? Right, folks, I'm gonna leave you to it, right? Muchas gracias, it's been a pleasure. You guys are too kind, too generous. May Allah forever keep you guys smiling and laughing. That's the awesomest of du'as, people. Right, so inshallah, till next week, have an awesome time. Right, subhanallah wa ta'ala amma yasifun, that may Allah be exalted and above that which they describe to him. Wa afdalu salati wa salam ala al-qa'il al-mamnoon, that the best of salutations and blessings upon the Messenger of Allah who was born in this season. We are in that season of when the Messenger of Allah was born. Al-qa'il, the one who said, Al-Madinatu khayrul lahum law kanu ya'lamun, that Medina and its way, people, the school of Medina, is better for them if but only they knew. Inshallah. With that, people, have an awesome evening, an awesome night, wherever you are, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.